This conference will now be recorded.
Now, let us wait for a couple of minutes.
Sure, Shiva. Sorry, Shiva. I didn't attend yesterday's class actually, but I heard your audio. Did you had a chance to give that links for the documentation?
Yeah, I am. Who is that who is speaking? I'm sorry, I
This is
can't
funny.
see.
Sorry, this is funny here.
Hey, funny. Funny. I had some issues. I had to format my PC, so I'll be sharing those documents with Lakshmi today. Okay, so I was
Oh, okay.
supposed to share them yesterday.
Oh,
She
okay.
did send me, her email address and other things. So I'll be
Okay.
sharing those things today.
Sure.
Okay. So what we
Sure, sure.
covered yesterday was about the networking, virtual networks, right? So and virtual network peering, right? So how do we
Okay.
enable peering between two virtual networks and the rest of? So that's what
Okay.
we covered yesterday.
Yeah, yeah. Sure, no worries. Like I just wanted to know, if I didn't
No, no,
miss anything.
I understood that. I understood, but don't worry. I think we will be able to cover that. As we move on, when we definitely have to look at virtual networks, and then at that point of time, we'll see.
Okay.
We'll cover. We'll try to at least go through all those things once again. So you are.
Yeah. Sure, sure.
So for some reason, I am not able to see how many people logged in. Funny, I heard you. I'm not sure
Yeah.
who else are there. Okay. Right, we'll move on. Let's get started. It's already 7:05. So we are discussing right now about the topics related to the networking, right? So Azure networking, right? Within this, we have multiple topics, right? This we have virtual networks, right? VNets we call it as subnets, and then we discussed about peering also yesterday. So which is basically allows to enable the communication between multiple virtual networks, right? So what we are going to discuss today is something called as NSGs, right? Which we call it as network security groups. Network security groups, right? NSGs. Right. So we have some other topics like DNS and routing and other stuff that which we'll be covering tomorrow and after tomorrow and so on. Then we'll move on further on that. Okay. So our topic for today is network security group. Now, what is this network security group, right? Why do we need this, and where are those areas that which we will be using this network security groups, and what is that advantage that which we are going to get, right? Now, we discussed yesterday that virtual networks are something that which will allow you to isolate and segment the entire infrastructure, right? Isolate and segment, right? Your network. Now, any resources within the virtual network, what we also discussed is will be able to communicate with each other without any issues, right? So that's what we discussed. So if you have a virtual network, this virtual network can be segregated into subnets, right? So that's what we had seen, right? Subnet 1, subnet 2, and so on, multiple subnets. Now all these subnets that what we see by default will be able to communicate with each other without any restrictions. So any resource which is part of a VNet by default will be able to communicate with each other, right? And what we also discussed is resource across the virtual networks will not be able to communicate with each other. That's why we go with peering or we go with gateway for enabling the communication between multiple VNets, right? Now, what is the best practice, right? So what is the best practice to go with? Is it good to go with multiple virtual networks, or is it recommended to create a VNet and create multiple subnets and divide your network, into the subnets, right? So you have two solutions. One, create multiple VNets, or go with a one VNet and create multiple subnets within that based on your requirement. Could be production, staging, or dev test, or uh, lab environment, or training, right? So and DMC. You can divide it into multiple subnets, right? Now, what Microsoft recommends is minimize the VNets as much as possible, right? Minimize the VNets. So to avoid that complexity, right? So to avoid that complexity of creating multiple VNets and then you put peering or what do you call it as gateways between them and so on, that basically kind of um, you know creates a complexity, right? So if you have 10 virtual networks, if you want to enable communication between them, you have to create peering across all of them, or you have to put kind of network gateway between them, right? So to allow the communication. Now, as if there is a requirement as such, then we can go with. I mean, if you want to put the traffic into a separate VNet altogether, and you don't want to enable communication between two VNets, then you can go with multiple VNets, right? Depends on the situation, right? But if you have a situation where you want to enable communication between all the different types of environments, and then you want to restrict the communication, then you can go with one VNet of multiple subnets, right? Subnet 1, subnet 2, and so on, right? Subnet 3. Okay, that's good. But what do I need to do to restrict the traffic between these, right? Or this, or 1 and 3 also, right? 1 and 3 also. Now for that, what you have is you have something called as network security group, right? Network security group. Now what is a network security group? A network security group, you can compare it with your firewall. Okay, you can compare that to your firewall. Now, what does a firewall will do? A firewall will basically restrict the traffic based on certain rules that which you define within the firewall, right? So those rules can be your inbound rules, right? Those can be your inbound rules or outbound rules. So inbound, you also call them as ingress, right? Right? So these are the other names that which we can use, but inbound and outbound are the common terminologies that which we use. Now, so okay, I have a network security group I created, and which defines, okay, so here are the rules that which you can assign. Here are the rules that which you go and put part of your network security group. But where are these network security groups to be assigned, right? Do I need to assign it to the subnet? Do I need to assign it to the virtual network, or do I need to assign it to the VMs which are part of the subnet, or resources that are part of the subnet, right? Now, network security groups can be tagged, one to your subnets and two to your network interface cards, which means you are assigning them to the virtual machines, which are part of your subnets itself, right? So you can assign a network security group here at your subnet level, or you can also assign them here at your virtual network, virtual machine network interface card, right? So if you want to assign a conflicting policy, you can assign it. For example, we'll discuss that. For example, you want to allow port 80 to all the machines which are part of subnet 1. Let us think so. Then you go and write a port rule at this network security group that which you create and tag it to subnet 1 and say that boss allow port 80. But there is one machine where you want to restrict the traffic. For that machine, you go and create another network security group rule and say that restrict port 80, right? So that's how you can take special cases, and you can also set multiple network security group rules within one subnet, or even to an individual virtual machines which might conflict to the rules that whatever you define at your subnet level, right? So a network security group is a kind of firewall that which will allow you to define what traffic should get inside your virtual, inside your subnets or out of your subnets, or what traffic should go in and out of your network interface card. Okay, so another important thing here that what we need to understand is you may also have some rules at OS level, right? Firewall rules, OS firewall rules are different from network security group firewall rules. Those two are different. You can still have your operating system firewall rules, right, which basically allows or denies traffic from the OS to your network interface card. You can still have, you can have a network security group tagged to your network interface card which allow or deny traffic and which further passes out or in of your subnet and then out of the subnet, right? Now each subnet, whatever is part of your VNet can have its own network security group rules, and based on what type of machines, what environment you created, based on which you created the subnet, you will define those rules there, right? So that is what a network security group is. Let us quickly go and look at our console and try to understand what are the other options that which you have. Okay, now for any resource what we select, you can directly go here to the search option and you can get network security groups here, right? You can see here, or you can also go to all services, right, from their network, and then you can select your network security group from there as well, right? So if I go to networking, then you will see your network security group here, right? I can go and add it to my favorites by clicking that star button so that I can see that here in my favorites list. Right. So this is the place where you can go and create a network security group, right? Now let us quickly see what are those options that which you have when you try to create a network security group, right? So name NSG1 will say, and a resource group I'll say that NSGRT will create one network security group, and I'll leave that in West India itself. Will create it. Now you just created a network security group, right? And this security group, what you created, will have rules as a part of this security group, right? So you can think like a firewall, right? A firewall will also have a rules, right? Now, this is what the default console is. And within this default console, what you see here is, you see something called as inbound security rules, and you see something called as outbound security rules. And you also see a network interface cards to which you can associate or assign or tag this particular network security group that what you created. What it means is, if I go and associate this particular network security group to an NIC card, so these rules will be applied to that network interface card of that virtual machine, right? That's what we had seen. You can assign to a virtual machine network interface card. You can also assign a network security group to a subnet, right? That's where you can go and select your subnets within the virtual network, right? Now we'll try to understand a couple of other very important things, right? So there are three default inbound roles and there are three default outbound roles, right? Outbound rules. Now these three inbound and outbound rules are the default rules that which you get within the network security group, and you will not be able to delete them, right? You will not be able to delete, right? None of these can be deleted. And similarly, you have outbound rules that can also be that are also, we cannot delete them, right? Now these three rules that what you see here, let us try to understand what do they do. Now before understanding, so there is something called as priority, right? Each rule will have a priority, each rule will have a name, and it also talks about port, right? What port you want this traffic to be, for what port of for what port you are creating this rule, right? That's what it is defined. And the port protocol related to that port, right? And your source, your destination, and what action, right? So whether you want to allow or deny, right? Any rule, any firewall rule will have these things. What are those things? First one is priority, right? Second one is name, and third one is port, fourth one is protocol, and fifth one is source and destination, and then the rule itself, right? Action, right? Allow or deny, right? So before you create a network security group rule, you should have all this information. Okay, so let us quickly discuss about the priority. A priority defines whether this rule will take precedence on any other rule or not. Think about a situation, you have two rules conflicting each other, part of the same network security group rule, or same network security group. Then which one will take precedence on what, right? So that's what the priority will define. Now your priority in network security group will range from 100 to 4096, right? So you can assign any of the number between this range. So what is that range? Which is nothing but 100 and 4096. This is the range. So what is the best practice of assigning the priority rules, right? So the best practice is, don't try to assign the rules like this, right? 100, 101, 102, and so on. No, this is not the practice. 103. No, this is not the practice. Now the recommended practice is try to leave some numbers in between, right? For example, 100, 110, 120, and so on. This is the best practice. Now, why this is the best practice? Now, let us say tomorrow there is a situation where you might need a priority number which might be kind of create a conflicting rule with an existing rule, right? So that time you may end up not finding a number which exactly might be after the number that what you have here, right? So to avoid those kind of situations, what we do is we go and create certain rules, certain priority numbers, certain rules with the priority numbers 100, 110, 120, and so on. Even in case if you want to get or add some other kind of rules in between, then you can go with 105 or so on, right? That is the advantage. So don't try to assign the rules with a continuous number. Try to give, you know, a gap between those two, between the priority numbers that which you assign. Okay. Now, and the default priority numbers, the default rules that what you have, default rules that what you have 65,000, right? 65,500 is one, and then 65,500, 65,000 is another one, and 65,001 is another, right? Now these are the default rules numbers that what you see here, right? So we will not be able to kind of assign anything around this. You can only assign between 100 and 4096. Okay. Now, so which number will take precedence on what? So anything with less number will take precedence, right? Or you can also say anything near to 100 will take precedence, right? So anything which is near to 100, anything which or anything with lower number will take precedence. For example, you have a rule with 200 priority and you have a rule with 100 priority or 110 priority. Obviously, the rule with 110 priority will take precedence on the rule with 200 or anything about that. Okay, so that's what we should be knowing. Okay, so that is about priority. Let us go back. Now there are certain inbound and outbound rules that which we had seen here, right? And these rules will basically of higher number, right? Higher number. If you want to have any rule which is conflicting, then obviously go and write with any number between this range, which anyway will be taking the precedence of over this, right? Now, so what are those inbound rules? Inbound rules are they are allowing traffic between virtual networks and load balancer and any destination. When we say any destination, it could be your virtual network, it could be your internet, right? And it also denies all the outbound traffic. So it is denying an outbound traffic, but the priority of this is higher because we have other rules, right, which are lower priority than this. Then they are taking precedence on top of it, right? So these are the three default rules, right? Now you can also see the outbound rules. So how generally the firewall rules will be in any organization, right? So most of the times, until and unless there is a specific requirement as such, we restrict all or we try to restrict most of the inbound traffic, right? Until and unless if you know that what is that it is needed, by default everything will be restricted. Restrict everything. Which is inbound, right? And what you do most of the times, we allow outgoing traffic or outbound traffic. So this is how the general rules will be, right? So we'll allow most of the outbound traffic, but if there is a specific requirement, there could be, right? So, but you can also restrict the outbound traffic as well, right? The same things you see here in the default rules, right? So if you just go and okay. Now let us try to see what are those options that which you have when you try to create a network security rule, right? Right. So this is an inbound rule that which we are creating. So you have a source and you have a destination, right? You have a destination. That's what. So within source, you have these options, right? One is any, which means that you are allowing traffic from all the different sources, which could be internet, which could be your VNet, and so on, right? Any IP address for that matter. That's what you can say it. Now, if you want to allow IP address specific range, right? Then you can go and put the CEDAR format, which means, and if you are seeing this example that what they gave, they are allowing all the traffic within this particular range, right? Now let us say that you have multiple IP addresses, only IP addresses. Let us say that you have 10 IP addresses and you want to allow traffic only to those 10 IP addresses, right? Then what you will do, you will enter those 10 IP addresses here with a comma between them, right? So that's what you are going to go and put the source and destination IP address. Or you have multiple subnets through which you want to allow the traffic, then you put /24 comma then some IP address /xx, right, and so on, right? So you can define multiple ranges with a separation between them, right? So provide an address using CEDAR notation, right? So you can also specify multiple IP addresses, that what you see here in the example, right? The information that whatever they give. Now what is this port range? Source generally won't specify most of the time the source port. If you are not going to go and put any source port, you will put a star, which means that everything. Now if you want to put a specific port, you can put it here, right? And if you have multiple ports like what we had seen above with the IP address, you'll put commas between them, right? Now provide the port so and so, and this is a port range, right? So if you have a port range like this, then you can also specify from this port to this port, or if you have multiple ports, you can also put commas and put the what do you call it as commas between them to allow multiple ports that which you can enter here, right? Now as it says, you can put star to allow everything, right? That is the source. The other one that what we have is the destination, right? So we'll I think we didn't discuss everything in source. We'll go back on. Right? There's something which is called as service tag. Now this service tag allows you different types of service tags with which you can assign to a traffic which is coming inside, right? You can see multiple service tags, right? Here is the list of service tags. Now let us say that you want to allow traffic only from internet, then you can go and select a service tag called internet, right? You go and select a service tag called internet. Or only virtual network, then you select a service tag called virtual network, right? Or some other option that whatever you want to, right? So network monitor or active directory and multiple things are there, right? We can go and play around with this, but most of the times you use either virtual network, internet, load balancer, or gateway, right? So these are the certain things that which you use, right? Now, if you want to allow the traffic over from the internet, then you can go and select the internet. So what does this rule now, whatever you wrote here, says? You are allowing everything from the internet, and there is no port as such that which you are defining here. That means whatever is coming from the internet, you are kind of writing a rule to, right? So you are allow or deny, again, that's what we see here, but that's what the source is, right? That is the source. And there's one more thing called the application security group. This also you can use it. Mostly the development guys will use this one, but we haven't used this. So there is an option that which we need to remember. So what are the three sources that which 3 or 4 sources? Anything that which it comes, a specific IP address range. Service tag defines what type of service you want to go with, whether it is internet, whether it is a specific virtual network, or whether it is a load balancer, and so on, right? So you have a list of service tags, and you also have a security group, right? Right. Let us go to the destination, right? Destination. So you also define a destination here, right? So you see IP address, virtual network, and then network security, right? And then what type of port you want to assign. The same thing that what you had seen in the source, you can also see that in the destination, right? So when you are writing a rule, most of the times you will have a port number here. Most of the times you might not have a port number here, but here you definitely will put some port number to which you want to allow or deny the traffic. Right? Now, if you are aware of the protocol, whether it is TCP or UDP, what type of protocol it is, then you go and select the protocol name, right? By default, it is any. And then an action that it says whether you allow or deny the, right? And then the priority. This is what we were saying, right? So this priority should be a number that which kind of tells the priority of this particular rule. If there is a conflicting rule, it will also define which takes precedence on what, right? So you can see if you click on this information, the rules are processed in the priority order. Lower the number, the higher the priority, right? And what they recommend, it means that Azure recommends leaving the gaps between the rules, right? So that's what we discussed, right? And the name. So this name should be kind of in alignment with what you write here, right? So by seeing the name of the rule, should be able to identify what the rule does, right? So that's what is the rule, right? And the description, which tells what the rule is and who has asked and some ticket number and all those things also you can put there, right? So this is what the different options that which you have when you create an inbound rule. And you will see similar options here when you go with the outbound rule as well, right? When you create the outbound rule, you will see similar, right? Similar options also. Right? So we'll just take a pause and I'll see if you guys have any questions, we'll take. Otherwise, we'll move. Any questions you can ask. Okay, so I'll take it as no. Yeah.
See, actually, the see those details we'll get from the requirement, right? Those details, the IP address and all those things.
Right. So what you said is right. Absolutely. So when you want to kind of so why we are doing this is something that we can where we are doing this is important, right? So if you are creating these at subnets level, then you when you design your network infrastructure, then you will put all those basic requirements, right? So use cases or requirements that whatever you have, and then you define, okay, so these are the set of resources which are getting into this subnet, and then you jot down all those requirements when it comes to the network perspective, right? So that's where you go and put for example, there are some web servers that which might need a 4080, right, or 4080 or 443 if it is secure, right? Or you are communicating with some other backend application servers which might be in a different subnets altogether. So right, so based on your requirement, you'll go and put certain rules and then tag them to your subnet, right? So reduce the number of what you call network security groups as much as possible, and try to put all the rules in a minimum number of network security groups, and then try to avoid too many what you call conflicting rules. So those are certain things that we need to keep in. But yes, when you design itself, you will design things what is allowed, what is not. But within the operations, right, when we move to production, then also there will be certain requirements that which will come on, right? That time you go and add additional rules to the existing network security groups, right? So that's how things will work.
Okay, thank you. And
But one thing what we need to make sure that we have to go with subnets itself to avoid multiple VNets. So that's the reason this part will become very important when you design, right? So subnets, and let us say that you have a DMZ itself, right? So that demands a different set of communication all together, right? So what are those guidelines? What are those ports allowed in it kind of thing? So you write that and tag it to your that DMZ subnet, right? So on. You're asking something.
And I mean, you are explaining some project. I mean, any sample project or something like that in
Yeah,
this session or
tomorrow
in
what
this
we'll
course.
do is yeah. So we'll take a what do you call a scenario tomorrow, like a three-tier application, and then see a web tier and database tier and application tier, and then try to put all of them in different things. Try to simulate one scenario around that. Okay, so that we'll be doing tomorrow, and then we'll see like how do we set at subnet level and conflicting traffic conflicting policies at your network interface level, and then what is the outcome, and those few scenarios we will be looking at them tomorrow.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Right. So this is about the network security groups, right? So what is left? Right. So what we do is we'll quickly look at a small situation where we generally work on, right? So what is that? What is that you do when you create a VM, or all these days from right from class one to till the other day? What we were doing is we were kind of, when you create the VM itself, you are assigning a role called a port called as 3389, right? 3389, which is your RDP port, right? And then let us say that that particular VM also got an IIS on top of it, which is 4080 or 443, right? Now, rather assigning that when you create a virtual machine, so what you can also do is you can create a basic rule which allows port 443 and 80 for your IIS, or 3389 for your RDP. And when you create a virtual machine, within the networking part, you can tag this particular network security group rule, so that by default it allows the traffic on 3389, and then also RDP port, and also on IIS 80 and 443, right? So let us quickly try to see what is that which is needed to create it, and then we'll move on from there. Okay. So we will have the extension of this scenario based, but let us start with a small, scenario, and then we'll have a multi subnet scenario tomorrow, and then try to put tools around that and see how do we configure those things. Okay, so that will be an extension for tomorrow. Okay. Now let us say that I am creating an inbound role which allows me to take RDP of the virtual machines from the internet. Okay, so my inbound rule should say that, so this is all inbound to your Azure environment, right? So whatever you are feeding the Azure, or whatever you are getting into Azure is nothing but your inbound traffic, right? So for me to access the virtual machines within the Azure environment over the port 3389, so I should be creating a inbound rule, right? So that inbound rule should allow is 3389. So that's what we are going to go and add a rule to this network security group that which you created, right? Now let us say, what is the source? So is it any? Now I'll go and select internet from the service tag, right? So anything that which is coming from the internet, right? Anything that which is coming from the internet is part of this particular rule. Now I don't put anything in the source, but destination, what is that I want is, I want a traffic to be allowed, right? Traffic to be allowed to what? An IP address. If you have a specific IP address, you can go and specify here, but you can also select a virtual network. So what does it do is, any traffic that which is coming from the internet and the destination is your virtual network, it is allowing the traffic. Now let us say that I want a specific IP address range. And I'll use all my IP addresses, let us say that in 10.x range, right? Let us say that 10.0.1.0/24, right? Let us say this is the range, which is around 255 here, right? Now, what is the destination port? You want to put this 3389, right? So this is my RDP port, right? Now, what is that? Whether it is a TCP or UDP, I'll put it as TCP, and then whether you want to allow or deny the traffic, I want to allow, and then priority of this, I will leave it as default, and then name of this is allow RDP, right? Right? So some description if you want, right? You are creating the role. Right? So you can also add one more rule for your port 80, or you can go and modify this at the later point. Let us say that you got to know that you want to add some additional port, but source and destinations are same. Then you can go and put some comma, and then port 80 and port 440. Right? This can also be done. Rather creating multiple rules here. So if the source and destination are the same thing, you definitely can go and modify the existing rule to accommodate the additional requirement. Right? Now, of course, you might not be able to change the name of this one, but maybe I think you might have to use a different naming convention, so that you can accommodate any changes in future as well, right? So this particular rule that what you created is part of the network security group called NSG, which basically allows 3389 and 80 and 443 from the internet, right? So that is your inbound rule. Now, if I create a virtual machine, right? Let us say that I create a virtual machine, and then what I have to do is I have to go and select the network security group as NSG1, and then all the rules that whatever are part of that particular network security group are assigned to the network interface card of this particular virtual machine, right? So let us see where do we go and assign that, right? Let us put this in the resource group, which is already there. So your machine should be in the same region where your NSG is, right? So we created that in West India, right? So otherwise you will not be able to see that particular NSG because they are region specific, right? And then your OS. Now here I'm not going to go and select any port. Okay, so which we used to do earlier. I'm not going to go and select any port. Reason being, I have a network security group rule which basically does this activity, right? So whatever we used to do earlier here, we are skipping that part, right? So let us get into the networking part, right? So here, what you do is you go and select the network security group, right? You see NIC network security group, right? Now let us go to the advanced. Then you see your network security group here listed, right? For some reason it is, I think that is in a different region, then I'll go and look into it. But what it should do is it should list this particular group, that the group that what we created, right? So that will be listed here. Let us go and see in which region we created that. So you will get that particular what do you call network security group listed here. Then you will tag it, right? Now, where is this network security group getting tagged? So this gets tagged to your network interface card, right? So you see it's NIC network security group, right? So this is getting tagged to NIC, not your virtual machine. What it means that you can go to the network interface card and you can directly tag this NSG1 there itself, rather coming to your VM settings and other stuff, right? So what we need to understand is you are not assigning a network security to the VM, you are assigning to the network interface card of the VM. That's the reason we were also discussing something about OS rules as well, right? There could be some firewall rules at operating system level also that still will be there. And it is recommended to have them as well as a part of OS hardening, that whatever you want to do, right? But those rules will not be are different from the NSG rules that which you assign to network interface card. This network interface card NSG rules are not related to your OS this thing, right? So that's what we need to understand. Okay. Now, so here we are assigning that to network interface card, not to your OS, right? Let me quickly go back and see where in which this thing we created. I think we created that in a that region. That's the reason we are not able to view that. Okay. So West India, right? We should select West India. Right. Yeah. And we should be able to see that option there now. Right. 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 You can see NSG1 that which you created earlier, right? So that likewise you can go and assign your network security group to the VM also. Okay. So what we do is we will stop here today, and then we will continue, because tomorrow scenario will, as I said, will take a little bit more time. We'll not be able to start today and complete it today itself. So we'll try to take multi-tier network situation, multi-tier application situation and try to put rules between multiple subnets and see how they behave and so on. So this RDP one also will cover tomorrow, because we covered most of these things. Tomorrow we'll be able to save that time. Okay. So tomorrow what we continue with is, we'll continue with the network security groups itself. And then once that scenario what we want to show, once it is done, then we'll go to something called as route tables. Okay, so there is a small topic called route tables, which will help us to understand how do we create route between, kind of between subnets and other stuff. That we'll see. We'll try to simulate that with OS router, which is then we'll go for the other topics. Okay. So if you have any questions, you can ask. We'll continue with this tomorrow as well. Any questions you can ask? We are going little slower, just to make sure that if we drop in between, then the scenario we may get confused. So I thought of holding that for tomorrow. Okay. Yeah, if you have any questions on this topic, then we'll take. Otherwise, I think we are done for today. Okay, so if no questions, I'll take it as no questions. We will catch up tomorrow in the morning at the same time. Have a great day ahead. Good night. Okay, bye-bye.
Vijay,
Yeah.
yeah, sir, shall we have 2 minutes of call after the disconnecting this one?
You want to talk to me? Yeah, yes, please.
Yeah, I want to talk to you, sir.
No issues.
So how can I contact? I mean, yeah.
I okay, so I think I need to get your number through Lakshmi itself. I'll try to get it and then I'll call you. Okay, so no problem.
Otherwise, shall we have one now? I mean, after the everybody disconnected.
Yeah, that should be fine. Yeah, I'll stay back.
That's fine.
Okay, Vijay. Thank you. Don't forget about that links. So this is funny.
I'm extremely sorry, Funny. I think you're asking.
No.
This is the second time or third time you're asking. I'll
Yeah,
make sure that
no
I
worries.
send it today. Okay?
Yeah. Sure. I mean, see, actually, I don't have any reference kinds of
Yeah, got
content.
you.
So that's the
Got
thing. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Vijay.
you.
See
No
you
problem.
tomorrow. Bye.
Yeah, bye.
సార్ మీకు తెలుగు ప్రాబ్లం లేదు కదా?
చెప్పండి, పర్లేదు.
సార్ యాక్చువల్గా ఇప్పుడు అది ఉంది కదా, అంటే ఇది ఎలా సార్? ఇప్పుడు క్లౌడ్ అడ్మిన్ అంటున్నారు, Azure అడ్మిన్ అంటున్నారు, అది ఎలా ఏది సార్? డిఫరెన్స్ ఏది సార్ అది?
ఒక పని చేద్దాము. ఐ థింక్ నేను మీ దగ్గర పర్సనల్ గా మాట్లాడతాను నేను యాక్చువల్గా. ఓకే, సో ఐ విల్ టేక్ యువర్ నెంబర్. ఐ థింక్ నేను మీకు కాల్ చేస్తాను. ఐ థింక్ ఐ విల్ ట్రై టు ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ వాట్ ఆర్ ఆల్ దోస్ థింగ్స్. దెన్ యు గెట్ టు నో వాట్ ఎగ్జాక్ట్లీ నీడ్ టు బి డన్. నేను మీకు కాల్ చేస్తాను, ప్రాబ్లం లేదు. నాకు మేబీ నాకు 8 o'clock ఎగ్జాక్ట్ గా మళ్ళీ ఇంకో సెషన్ ఉంది అన్నట్టు. సో మనం 10-15 minutes మాట్లాడదాం దీని గురించి. నేను మీకు మొత్తం ఎట్లా ఉంటది ఏంది అనేది ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ చేస్తాను మీకు. ఓకేనా? నేను మీ నెంబర్ తీసుకుంటాను, లక్ష్మి దగ్గర తీసుకుంటాను. నేను ఐ విల్ కాల్ యూ. ఓకేనా? లేదంటే వాళ్ళని ప్యాచ్ చేయమని చెప్తాను. ఓకే, ప్రకాష్ కదా?
అలాగే సార్. నాకు వచ్చాను సార్, అంటే నేను బెంచ్ మీద ఉన్నాను సార్, దగ్గర 4 months అవుతుంది. నేను నాకే వేరే కోర్స్ నేర్చుకున్నాను కానీ అసలు అవ్వలేదు. సో ఇది
నేను మాట్లాడతానండి మీ దగ్గర. డెఫినెట్లీ ఐ విల్ టాక్ టు యు. ఓకే
సార్. థ్యాంక్స్ అండి.
నో ప్రాబ్లం.